It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump. So
This isn't Self-Esteem Weekly. This is a reality check.
Craig, shut up. It's Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, Jennifer Kahnweiler is back with a revised second edition of her book, The Introverted Leader. Welcome to the podcast. Hope you are well. If you're a long-time listener to the show, first off, thank you very much. But secondly, this might seem like deja vu. It was episode 180 back in 2015 when Jennifer Kahnweiler was on the podcast to talk about this very book, The Introverted Leader, Building on Your Quiet Strength. We had a great discussion on that book that she wrote in 2009, but since then she has come out with a second edition, and it's not very often you get to redo a success. Maybe if you're George Lucas, but no, there is no Jar Jar Binks in this book. I wanted to see what going back over and changing was like because, I wrote a book in 2010 called The Realist Guide, and frankly, without a large check that I know no one is going to give me, I am not going to revise or update that book. So, I encourage you to go listen to episode 180 if you haven't, and you can find it on Apple Podcasts, or you can go to the website realitycheckpodcast.com and listen to that one and this one as we talk about Introverted Leaders, second edition, with Jennifer Kahnweiler. You've got a second edition of this book. How was the initial reaction when you first put the book out 10 years ago?
Craig, I tell you, it's hard to believe it's been that long. It was very positive. In fact, it blew away my expectations. It was the timing. Timing is everything. And we were just getting the discussion of introverts, as you and I had discussed last time, into the zeitgeist. And as the very first book, I got a lot of really sort of perplexed, I might say, reactions. People would say, how can you be a leader and also be an introvert? And so it's very different this time. So it's been very gratifying as well.
Yeah, when it becomes counterintuitive, people, even if it makes sense when you explain it, they still don't quite get it. Because I have that same issue with the negativity that I talk about, how it can be useful. I don't promote it as a lifestyle, but I do say that here's instances where we would traditionally call it negative, but yet here is why it's useful. And if you actually take it as such, you can become a better leader. And here is a situation where if you look at your introverts and use their skill set, you can become a better leader, and introverts can be better leaders. So yeah,
absolutely.
Anytime you try to throw in something that's counterintuitive, you get that initial pushback. So how did you break through the pushback with the book?
Well, the book was one of the first books. It was actually the first book that addressed introversion in the workplace. And, and I tell the story about how I was working as a coach and a leadership development consultant in a number of different companies. And I kept looking for an aid, the old story of like, I want to give my clients and the employees I was working with some tools. And I just couldn't find anything that was appropriate that would really fit the needs of people who were quieter, who, drew their energy from within, who weren't the loudest voice in the room. And I kept searching for a book. So then at the same time, I was interested in writing a second book. I had written one before, and so I knew I could write a book, but it's a book that was really playing to my heartstrings and where I felt there was a real need. And so that's what, and when you write a book, you want to be motivated, Craig. You can't, it's you don't just go into it and say, I'm going to write a book. If it's going to be any book of worth and substance. And so I think the book, what I did was really go back to the people who I had been working with as clients and to the individuals who were introverted, which we know now make up between 40 and 60% of the population worldwide, and saying to them, what would be helpful to you? And I also drew upon the years I had spent working in those roles in organizations.
Well, my guest today is Jennifer Kahnweiler. Her book that we're discussing is the second edition of The Introverted Leader. And so what did you learn the most from the first time you put the book out? What was the one key thing that you discovered through the process of promoting a book, selling a book, and putting it out into the world?
Well, I guess those are two questions. Selling a book and promoting a book, I learned tons. But what did I learn about this particular topic, or what resonated for me was that people were hungry for learning about this topic, and particularly introverts, and that they really needed to know that there was nothing wrong with them. And I think that was the biggest shift when I had the subtitle being Building on Your Quiet Strength. I truly meant that, but I didn't realize how much that would mean to people who would come up to me after speeches or write me an email, a very well thought out email saying that, I'm stepping into who I am. And that feels very powerful. I'm paraphrasing, but that was kind of the general theme. Because when you write, you just don't know how that's going to land, Craig, right? When you put content out there and put your ideas and what you are learning from people and you're sharing it, you have no idea if anyone's going to read it, if anyone's going to really care. But I felt really compelled to share those messages, and it was very gratifying. And I continually hear that from people around the world when I've had an opportunity to speak to groups, from Paraguay to Vietnam to Singapore and many countries, that this is really a worldwide phenomenon, that people are starting to become much more aware of this temperament preference.
So what did you put into the new edition? Because the second edition, there must have been something that you said, this has changed or this is new. I have to add this to the book. I wish I had known this 10 years ago. What did you add?
No, I was going to say, and I'm interrupting you right now, which is one of the tools I have in the book, which is kind of funny. I said something about extroverts don't take it personally when introverts interrupt them, and introverts don't interrupt them because it's not usually what they do, but sometimes it's necessary, right? But a couple of points that are different in this book is that basically I really focus more on things like communication and interpersonal skills. And I drill down into, because I got a very big response to like models and tools and scripts. So even like what to say, how do you specifically use gestures? And I'm not saying a negative gesture, but a positive one, like holding your hand up in the air and saying, I have 3 points to make, the first point and the second point and the third point, like we do actually in speaking, Craig, right? We do that kind of thing. But I think people want that specificity. I can't say it, specificity. Specific advice. Let's put it that way.
Grab the thesaurus.
You wrap it at what?
I said you grab the thesaurus and we'll figure out how to say that because I'm not even going to try it. I'm not going to try it.
Should be, right. I was going to say you're in California, so it's a little bit. You have an excuse to not say words right, but it's afternoon here in Atlanta.
Hey, I've only been here for 3-4 months. I don't have an excuse. You say words the way they're supposed to be said, or in my case, I'll try it once. And if I don't say see, I can't even know how to say it.
See, I got you off the track.
No, but I will quickly use a thesaurus because I've done that because I don't use a script when I speak, and I've done that a couple times where I start a word and I just own up to it. I'm like, yeah, I'm not that one's not going to work. So then I'll quickly think of the other words. It's not that big a deal, to quickly go on the fly and change the words. That's what thesauruses are for.
Something about the brain goes on there. So, but in any case,
but I love how you immediately attacked California.
Listen, I have a daughter living in California, and the last thing I'll say about that is, well, my mother said if they go to college in California, they won't come home, and she was right. I've talked to other people who have said the same thing. So you might come home. I don't know what home is for you, Craig, but
no, home is Boston, and all I hear is about snow, and I guess there's some kind of cyclone bomb that's going to hit in the next couple days.
Exactly. So we were talking about what I gave, what kinds of things did I include that I really was glad to be able to include. And let me back up just to say that I have a wonderful relationship with my publisher, Barrett Kohler. Steve Prasante has been the editor of a few of my books. He's the CEO. He's very introverted. He's the one who I credit for having seen my proposal come across his desk or onto his laptop with many others that he got every year. And so he gave me the opportunity last year to revise the book. And he said, with the second edition, you can change things that you really didn't, that you kind of cringe at when you read, either in terms of wording, in terms of content, but you have an opportunity to really revisit it. And that's what I did, to look at the topic now with the lens of a decade passing. After we've had this idea, as I said, of introversion rising to the surface, I call it the rise of the introvert. So what did I include? I included what I've learned on the road and from readers and what their experiences have been. So there's a lot of new stories in the book. As I mentioned, there's scripts, there's, what dialogue, what you could say when you're being interrupted, by an extrovert, for instance. How do you engage people on the team or in a meeting who are not contributing, because you're losing out on that contribution and the potential innovation and ideas that we know that you get when people when you tap into that well. So you're not just using, for instance, brainstorming in the traditional sense, but even a tip that I learned working in one organization after the first book had come out, and just saying to people. I experiment with this actually myself one time in saying, let's just write that down. We're throwing out a question to the group right now. I'd like everybody, before you talk, to write that down. Now, that's an example of an introvert-friendly technique. One might not call it that, but that's exactly what it is. And what happens when you use these techniques and you intersperse them into organization, you really start to see changes. So I really consciously looked. I had my radar out there, and I was looking for what people were doing to engage. And I found many examples. So we have a whole section on that. How do you hire and retain introverts? So there, things that you can do that people shared with me that they do in terms of prepping for interviews, not putting them too close together, actually reviewing the resume before they talk with people, pausing. And then introverts themselves, not making sure that they don't just hire people that look like them. So, I found that from one engineer. He said, I have to, even though I've got a talker in the group and somebody I'm interviewing who's very extroverted, I need to not shut that person off and be open to what they can contribute. So, the diversity really kind of moves both ways. And by the way, that's another finding that has occurred, Craig, over the last decade. And this has been becoming more and more, and I'm very pleased about it, a part or a component of inclusivity and diversity. The idea that we have different temperaments. Does that make sense? I know you're doing some research now on organizations.
Oh, well, absolutely. And I was trying to think, are people specifically looking for introverts, or is it just a personality trait that you can use? So it's like, we have a specific position. We're looking for a person with this right type of background, but someone who's introverted would be better at it. Is that how people are looking at introverts?
I haven't heard that as blatantly said like that.
Of course not.
They haven't actually said, an introvert. But I think if we take off the biases that we have that are usually, what's the term that's used a lot, unconscious bias, you will discover that in hiring and in promotions that oftentimes the introverts are pushed aside. And so when people with influence and leadership are taught to recognize introversion as a quality and to accept people who are different than themselves, then you do see differences in the outcomes. And let me give you one quick example. I work with a company they're actually a pretty regular client, and they are very committed to addressing introversion, and which I'm pleased about because I come in and talk with them and do trainings on the introverted leader, on the genius of opposites, and we discuss all these issues. And one of the people who's responsible for bringing me in is a very introverted herself, and Stephanie told me that when she sits in on these meetings when they're deciding, who's going to be promoted, who's going to be given cool project opportunities, she oftentimes in the past would hear that people were being passed over because they weren't visible. Oh, we haven't heard from that guy, or he's so quiet. And she has made it her conscious commitment to really stop people and say, what do you really know about this person? And let me share my experience. So she's actually being an advocate for some of the folks on her team who were formerly being passed over. And that's the kind of example I'm talking about. When you have people who are aware, then you start to see that they put that into action, and that can affect a whole culture.
When you do a research and data-rich topic like you have done, and you put the book together, things evolve, things change. What was 100% correct 10 years ago may have evolved, new discoveries, new new information has come to light.
Yeah.
Is there anything in the first edition that you put out there that you went, wait a second, that is not necessarily right anymore because things have changed?
Yeah, I think if there would be one major shift in the book, and you'll read it if you skim the book or read it in the tone of it, is that I put much more emphasis this time on going to the strengths of an introvert. And the first time it was more, I did have elements in there, and I take full responsibility for this. Was to say, you should change this. You should work on this. It wasn't like overt, but there were subtle references throughout. And that's the part that I said, I cringe about, because really, as my research evolved from that point when the book came out, and I started to see that is not the message at all that we want to give people. We don't want to say you never have to change. You never have to flex. I mean, even extroverts have to flex sometimes and be quiet, right? And to use their inner selves to come up with ideas, etc. But I think that there's been such a strong message to conform to the extrovert ideal that I think it even seeped in my first book. And I take responsibility, and I'm glad. I'm so happy that I've been able to completely get away from that and say, God, the strengths that we've talked about are just so tremendous. And so you have to use that. You have to see that you're engaged listening, and that, the fact that you are wonderful in building relationships and one-on-one. You want to leverage that. You want to leverage that in more situations in your workplace and at home. So yeah, I think that would be, probably one of the shifts. I think I got a nice testimonial here from Adam Grant, who you may know, Craig, from best-selling author of Give and Take and Originals, and he said in his endorsement, right now we're in the midst of a renaissance of introverts in leadership roles. Now, you didn't get that before. That was like, Adam and I connected when he was doing his research 10 years ago. He and his two colleagues came out with the first major study that was a very well done research study about introverts being terrific leaders, particularly for extroverted salespeople. But going on with what Adam said, he goes, but too often introverts still feel unprepared and uncertain about how to lead. And then he said that Jennifer worked with introverted leaders, and I've been in the trenches. And this is full of advice. And I think that's really what I'm most proud of, that the book, the lessons that I surface is really more from what I'm hearing from people.
Well, as it's become more accepted and understood, and businesses are not necessarily screaming away from introverts anymore. Yeah. Now that you have the second edition out, how is marketing the book and getting that out different than when you started 10 years ago? Because I believe the audience might be more accepting now.
Right. And, when you're trying to position a new product, I guess, if you will, you have to say, well, what's different this time? And that's really been my message. What's different, like the introvert friendly environment and increasing engagement. And, how do you hire, like I mentioned. I also put together a new quiz that is a way for people to become more aware of their own strengths and also the areas they might want to work on as both an individual contributor, somebody who's working in an organization, or people that are trying to get the best out of the entire team. So I try to emphasize what the unique factors are, like just when we're marketing anything, Craig, right? It's like, what's different about this book? And I think it's been cool to take a look at my journey, from the beginning of 10 years ago and having been in this space and watching it grow and become one of the players and among fortunately many voices in the field. I got a note a few weeks ago that they said, do you want to be one of the top 100 blogs on introvert? And I was like, I had to sit down. It's like 100 blogs. Now, we don't know if all those blogs are active, but I thought, wow, that's quite a change from when there were just a couple of us who were really carrying the mantle.
So are there still positions out there that, when I keep thinking of introverts, I know that certain people should probably not be sales folks as far as introverts, because you have to be, is there still a stigma of being an introvert in certain positions? And have there been situations where that stigma has gone away because of the book?
Well, I don't know if it's because of the book or not.
At least I would say, not necessarily the book, but because it's become more...
People are more aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, more. I definitely think whenever you have it on the coffee, we should say water cooler conversation, or when people are talking about it, there is definitely less stigma. I mean, I think that's a huge shift when you talk about a change. But I think my friend, Bill Stainton, who's in our organization.
Absolutely, Bill's a great guy.
Yeah, Bill's been a coach of mine and a real supporter of my work. And Bill once said to me earlier when we were working on one of the speeches, he said, Jennifer, it's always easier for people to change than it is for, let's say, to turn the bow of a ship, a large ship. And I think about an organization or a society as taking longer to make changes. So I think people are getting it more and more. They're still, I think when you talk about, let's go back to salespeople. There was some interesting work done by same person, Adam Grant, and also Dan Pink, who you might know of. Dan has a new wonderful book called When I'm in the middle of now that you might like. But anyway, they both collaborated on the idea of this of the ambivert. But Dan actually wrote a book which uses that term quite a bit. You and I chatted on our last call, I think, about that ambivert that you thought you might be. Craig?
Yeah, but I also think it's as I've gotten older and I've talked to more people, the ambivert thing, I believe it actually exists. So I'm not somebody who doesn't believe in it. But it's also like the extremely popular pretty girl who says, "Oh, I'm a real nerd," and it's like, no, you're not. You don't know what you're talking about because you think you are, but you don't actually understand what that really entails. So I think a lot of the times it's really extroverted people who at times are slightly introverted, and so they think they're introverts. But
that's right. No, I agree with you. And I one thing I do, I simplified the definition of what introvert and extrovert is from in a real practical way. And I think what I've really discovered is that if people say that they must have downtime, it's like, I have to decompress. I mean, I don't know if you say that, Craig, but when I've once been with people, I got to have time alone. That's usually a pretty strong introvert. But if an extrovert will say, yeah, that's kind of nice. I like, sitting in yoga class and doing the shavasana at the end. That's nice.
Or their downtime is going
calms them down a little. What's that?
I was going to say, or their downtime is going to the bar and talking to other people in a less formal state.
That's in a less what state?
Formal state.
Formal state. Yeah, that could be their downtime. I love that. I might steal that line from you. I know you were a comedian once.
Well, it's like speakers. The speakers are like, oh, I get off stage and I have to decompress. And really, I see a lot of speakers that their decompressing is just talking to more people in a more casual environment. And that's not introversion.
I agree with you. But what Dan found is he took examples of different salespeople, and he has throughout I think he begins and ends with a Fuller Brushman type person. But he said that basically, and Adam found this in his research, that you need both skill sets to be successful as a salesperson. You have to be out there, you have to be a great listener, and you have to really go deep and understand and shut up to make the sale, like listen. But you also have to sell. You have to get out there, and selling is a lot of getting out there, and it's a numbers game, and it can take a tremendous amount of energy. But that's his theory. Now, I have to say, when I wrote this last book, I think it was this book. Yeah, I tried to put a call out there for introverted salespeople, Craig, and I got very few responses, and I heard from many other functional areas. And I just don't think it fits most salespeople. But I will say one thing, that you can be a very effective salesperson as an introvert. There's a new book out by one of our colleagues in NSA that's published by Amicom. The name escapes me right now, but it's a very good book on salespeople and he is a very successful person as an introvert. So I think it definitely can be done. And one of the examples that I use in this book, it talks about how it can be a blend, and I might be mixing it up with Genius, but I think I also used it in this one. And that is, you have a person out there doing the hardcore expressing of the sale, trying to get the sale, promoting, talking, schmoozing, doing all those things. You know that word schmoozing, right? Out in California.
Again, I've only been here a couple months. It's not like they gave me a personality transplant.
I forgot. You're a newbie. But
also, really, schmoozing is schmoozing is an old school New England.
Yiddish.
It's
Yiddish
yeah,
term.
it's Jewish term. I'm from New England.
Yeah, you know.
Temple Beth Israel is right across the street from me. I
All
know
right,
all those.
good.
Yeah,
So at least you don't call it schmuzzing like some people do. But
yeah. I don't have chutzpah.
chutzpah. That one I haven't heard yet, but that's funny. So, there's that extrovert doing all of that, right? And then you've got the guy in the back or the woman in the back who's a salesperson who's just kind of having these quiet conversations with the people at the sales conference or, who they're trying to target and just understanding what their objections are, what they like about the product. Let's get to learn a little bit more about your needs, not pushing. And, the two of them could be an awesome pair to really make the sale. But I think it's a unique combination to try to get all of those skills in one person. And it tends to be, I think because of the energy demand from selling, that's been my experience. I don't have any research at this point to back that up, but it's my anecdotal experience. I just don't get a lot of interest either from introvert organizations that have salespeople. And the ones who are extroverted aren't really interested. They don't really have the time. If it's not going to help them sell to people, they don't necessarily want to listen. Although I think I have worked with a couple that have found that to be the case, that they sold to IT people. And it was very helpful to understand the psyche of an IT person, which tends to be more introverted.
Oh, absolutely. And so the book is The Introverted Leader, second edition. Last question. Is there anything that you didn't put in this one that you want to put into the third edition?
Great one. I think what I would like to do next time is include, and thank you for thinking about the third edition, go deeper onto some of the unique challenges that we have for women and other groups across the world. And bring in the cultural aspect and the gender aspect there. I think that would be very intriguing for me to pursue that route. So thank you for asking that.
Where can people find you, and where, more importantly, can they get the book?
Hopefully everywhere they can find me. No, thanks for asking. The book comes out, the second edition of The Introverted Leader comes out on March 6th, which is on Tuesday.
That's today.
In the U.S. Yeah, and then they can reach me at my website is probably the best way. And I'd love people to take the quiz. We're trying to gather data on the results on that we're going to share. So we have a bigger base to draw from and draw conclusions from. It's a very short Introverted Leader quiz. So we'd love you to take that. That's right on the website. There's videos, there's articles, there's free sample chapters to download, all kinds of goodies. And that's jenniferkahnweiler.com. So that would probably be the best. You can go to Amazon to get the book. We'd love you to pre-order or order. And it's just been a delight. Thank you so much, Craig.
Well, it's great to have you back on, and good luck with your second edition. We'll look forward to the third edition when it comes out.
Thank you. From your voice to my publisher's ears. Thank you so much.
That's the show. Thanks to Jennifer for her time. You can leave feedback on the website, realitycheckpodcast.com, or you can email Craig at speakercraigprice.com. Big announcement next week, so until then...